I borrowed money from everyone I knew just to buy a birthday cake, but when I reached their place, they another cake with someone else, and I stood outside holding mine like a fool. My hands are shaking as I type this, but I need to get it out. I need someone to know how badly I messed everything good in my. It started 6 months ago. Sarah's birthday was coming, and I wanted to do something special. We'd been together 3 years, living together for one, and I thought I was going to marry this woman. She deserved the world, but my bank account had other plans. I'd been out of work for 2 months, construction dried, bills piled, and my pride was somewhere buried under a mountain of rejection letters. Sarah never complained, never made me feel small, just kept working her 2 jobs and telling me we'd figure it out together. But her birthday was coming, 30 years old, a milestone, and I had exactly 47 to my name. I started asking around. My brother lent me 50D. My mom gave me 80 from her grocery money. My best friend Jake in 100. Even asked my neighbor Mrs. Chen, who insisted on giving me 40 despite being on a fixed income. All told, I scraped together 320. Not for a ring, not for a vacation, for a custom birthday cake from that fancy bakery downtown. The one with the window displays that made Sarah stop and stare every time we walked by. She'd press her face to the glass like a kid, pointing at the elaborate decorations, the perfect frosting roses, the way they wrote names in that gorgeous script. Someday, she'd always say, when we're not counting every penny. I wanted to give her that someday. The plan was simple. Surprise party at our apartment. Her sister was bringing friends. I'd borrowed folding chairs from the church, even got some decorations from the dollar store. But the centerpiece, the thing that would make her eyes light, was going to be that cake. 3 layers, vanilla with strawberry filling. Happy 30th birthday, Sarah, in that fancy script she loved. Buttercream roses around the edges. It was going to be perfect. I picked it at 4 p.m. on her birthday. The thing was heavier than I expected, and the baker made me sign 3 different papers promising I understood it was fragile. I carried it like it was made of glass, walking the 8 blocks home because I couldn't afford an Uber and the bus seemed too risky. The apartment building came into view, and I felt this surge of pride. Finally I was going to give Sarah something that would make her feel special. Something that would show her I was still the man she fell in love with, even if I couldn't find work, even if I couldn't pay the bills. I climbed the stairs carefully, my arms burning from holding the cake box steady. 2nd floor. Almost there. I could hear voices from our apartment, music playing, Sarah's laugh through the chatter. They'd started without me, but that was okay. That was part of the plan. Her sister was supposed to keep her busy while I said everything. I reached our door and fumbled for my keys with one hand, trying not to jostle the cake. The voices were clearer now. Louder, more people than I expected. I got the key in the lock and pushed the door open with my shoulder. Surprise! The words died in my throat. There was Sarah in the middle of our living room, surrounded by all the same people I'd invited. The folding chairs I'd borrowed were arranged in a circle. The dollar store decorations I'd hung were still, but in the center of it all was another cake. A bigger cake, fancier cake. Professional level gorgeous cake with Happy Birthday Sarah, written in gold script that made my vanilla cake look like a grocery store afterthought. And standing next to Sarah, one arm around her waist, holding her ready to into this magnificent creation, hers was Marcus. Marcus who'd been, just a friend, for the past 6 months. Marcus who had a job, a car, a savings account, and apparently the good sense to order his cake from a bakery that delivered. Everyone was looking at them, phones out, ready to capture the moment. Sarah was glowing, laughing at something Marcus had whispered in her ear. His hand was on the small of her back, the same spot where I used to rest mine when we'd cook dinner together. Nobody saw me in the doorway. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably 30 seconds, holding my cake like watching my girlfriend into another man's gesture. Watching her feed him the first bite while everyone cheered. That's when Jake noticed me. His face went white. Oh man. Mike. The room turned. 20 pairs of eyes looked at me standing in the doorway of my own apartment, holding a cake box like some sort of delivery guy who'd gotten the address wrong. Sarah's smile faltered. Her eyes went from confused to horrified to something that looked like pity. Mike, honey, I thought we're working late. Marcus just wanted to. But Marcus stepped forward, still standing in my spot next to my girlfriend. Sorry man. Didn't know we're planning something too. Maybe we can have both cakes. The room was dead silent except for the music still playing from someone's phone. Some pop song about being unstoppable. I looked at Sarah, really looked at her. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Expensive looking. Her hair was done in a way that took hours. Professional makeup. She looked like she was going somewhere special after this. She looked like she was going somewhere special with him. I borrowed money from everyone. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Chen gave me her grocery money. Sarah's face crumpled. Mike, I didn't know. I didn't ask for any of this. Marcus just said. Just said what? I was still holding the cake. My arms were shaking now. Just said he'd throw my girlfriend a better party than I could. Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable. It wasn't like that, man. Sarah mentioned she'd never had a proper birthday party, and I just thought. Thought what? Show everyone what a better boyfriend looks like. The room was getting smaller. All those faces staring at me. Some pitying, some embarrassed, some trying not to look at all. My brother was there shaking his head. The money he'd lent me suddenly felt like it was burning in my pocket. I'm gonna put this in the kitchen, I said because I had to do something with my hands before I dropped the cake or it at the wall. I walked through my own living room like a stranger, heard past all these people who were supposed to be celebrating with me, past Sarah who was reaching out like she wanted to touch my arm but couldn't quite do it. I set the cake on the counter next to the pile of dishes from their perfect little party. her through the kitchen window, I could see into the Johnsons' apartment across the alley. They were having dinner, just the two of them, normal and quiet and not completely falling apart. When I turned around, Sarah was standing in the kitchen doorway. Mike, please. This isn't what it looks like. What does it look like, Sarah? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Behind her, I could hear Marcus trying to restart the party, telling everyone to dig into the cake, his cake. The one that was sitting in the middle of our living room like it belonged there. Purred. It looks like I borrowed money from my unemployed brother and my retired neighbor and my struggling best friend to buy a cake for a party that was already happening without me. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't deny it. Heard. It looks like everyone knew about this except me. It looks like my girlfriend has been planning a birthday party with another man. Mike, it's not. It's not what? It's not that I've been seeing him. It's not that I've been lying to me for months. It's not that let me in front of everyone we know. The tears spilled over, but I was done being the guy who made her feel bad about her choices. I'm gonna go for a walk, I said. When I come back I'd like him gone. I pushed past her, past the living room full of people who were now very quietly eating cake that wasn't mine, past the decorations I'd hung with such hope just hours ago. I walked down those same 8 blocks, heard, but this time I had empty hands and a head full of the sound of everyone I'd ever trusted laughing at Marcus's jokes while my cake sat untouched in the kitchen. I walked until my phone died and the streetlights came on and I couldn't pretend anymore that this was just a misunderstanding. When I finally came home at midnight, Marcus was gone. But so was Sarah's suitcase, so were her photos on the nightstand. So was the spare key I'd given her 6 months ago. She left a note on my pillow, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to happen like this. I'm sitting here now, looking at that note, and I realized she didn't say she was sorry it happened. Just sorry about how it happened. Sorry I found out the way I did. Sorry I made a scene at her party. The cake is still in the kitchen untouched. 3 layers of vanilla with strawberry filling that cost me every favor I had left in the world. Tomorrow I have to face Mrs. Chen and tell her why her grocery money bought a cake that nobody wanted. 3 weeks after the party that destroyed I was sitting in my car outside Mrs. Chen's apartment building, trying to work the courage to knock on her door. The 40 she'd given me was burning a hole in my conscience. I'd managed to scrape together enough to pay back Jake and my brother, but Mrs. Chen's grocery money was different. She'd handed it to me with arthritic fingers and told me young love was worth celebrating. Now I had to look her in the eye and explain that her sacrifice had bought nothing but my humiliation. I'd been avoiding everyone since Sarah left. Screening calls, staying inside, ordering food with money I didn't have just so I wouldn't run into anyone who'd witnessed my meltdown. But the guilt was eating me alive, and Mrs. Chen deserved better than my cowardice. I knocked on 2B and heard her shuffling toward the door. The locks clicked open, and there she was, barely 5 feet tall, squinting at me through thick glasses. Michael, how are dear? How was Sarah's party? My throat closed. She was asking because she cared. Heard because she'd invested her grocery money in what she thought was going to be a beautiful moment between 2 people in love. Mrs. Chen, I need to give you money back. I held out 2 20s, but she pushed my hand away. Don't be silly. That was a gift. How did she like the cake? I stood there in her doorway, looking down at this sweet old woman who believed in happy endings, and I couldn't find the words to tell her that everything she'd hoped for had turned to ash. She loved it. I lied. Chen clapped her hands together, her face lighting like I'd just told her I'd won the lottery. I knew it. Young love is so precious. Hold on to that girl, Michael. The good ones are hard to find. I left the money on her kitchen counter when she went to get us tea, slipped it under her sugar bowl and ran like the coward I'd become. But avoiding the truth was getting harder every day. My brother called constantly. Jake showed at my door twice before I finally answered. Even my mom started leaving voicemails asking why I seemed so distant when she called. The worst part was that everyone who'd been at the party was pretending it hadn't been as bad as it was. Like they were protecting me from my own memories. Jake tried the hardest. He came over with an pizza one Saturday, acting like nothing had changed. So what's next, man? And Sarah thinking about getting a place with more space. I stared at him across my coffee table, this friend who'd watched me get humiliated in real time. And realized he didn't know she'd left. Nobody knew. She's gone. He stopped mid-bite of pizza. Gone where? Moved out. With him, I assume. The color drained from his face. Mike, I had no idea. When did this happen? The night of the party. While we're eating his cake. Jake set down his slice and leaned forward. Dude, why didn't call me? I would have come over, we could have talked. And said what? That I was too to see what was right in front of me. That I borrowed money from everyone I knew to compete with a guy who was already winning. I wasn't a competition man. Couldn't have known. But that's where Jake was wrong. I could have known. Should have known. The signs had been there for months. Sarah staying late at the office. New clothes appearing in her closet. Her phone face down during dinner, buzzing with texts she'd ignore until I left the room. The way she'd gotten distracted during conversations, like her mind was somewhere else. I'd told it was work stress. I told she was planning something special for us. I told a lot of things because the truth was too to look at directly. She'd been pulling away for months, and instead of fighting for her, I'd fought for a birthday cake. 2 days after Jake's visit, I got a text from Sarah's sister Emma. Can we talk? We met at a coffee shop downtown, one of those places with exposed brick and overpriced lats where Sarah used to drag me on Sunday mornings. Emma ordered for both of us, which told me everything I needed to know about how this conversation was going to go. She asked me to give this, Emma said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $320, the exact amount I'd spent on the cake. My hands started shaking. She kept track. She felt terrible about the money, Mike. She knows how hard it must have been to borrow it. Terrible enough to leave a note instead of having an actual conversation. Emma winced. She didn't know how to face after everything. After everything she did mean. Mike, it's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. She was seeing someone else while I was planning her birthday party. While I was asking my unemployed brother and my elderly neighbor for money so I could buy her a cake. Emma stared into her laddie. She never meant for it to go that far. How far did it go, Emma? Before the party, I mean. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Emma couldn't look at me. That's what I thought. I stood to leave, but Emma grabbed my wrist. She really did love Mike. Marcus was just, he was there when things got hard. When lost job and got depressed and stopped talking to her about anything real. So it's my fault. That's not what I'm saying. It sounds like exactly what's saying. That I deserved this because I wasn't successful enough or happy enough or whatever enough. Emma let go of my arm. Weren't present enough. The last few months, it was like we're disappearing right in front of her. Marcus saw her. Really saw her. I looked at this woman who'd been like a sister to me for 3 years, who'd helped me pick out Sarah's Christmas presents and listened to me practice what I was going to say when I eventually proposed. And all thought the best way to handle that was to let me at a surprise party I planned with money I couldn't afford. We thought be working. Sarah thought be working. Marcus was just trying to do something nice, and when I showed to my own girlfriend's birthday party in my own apartment with a cake I'd sacrificed everything to buy, Emma started crying then, quiet tears that she wiped away with coffee shop napkins. I'm sorry, Mike. We're all sorry. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I left the check on the table and walked out, let her explain to the barista why there was $3.20 in cash next to 2 barely touched lats. That night, I called my mom. Michael, it's so late, honey. Is everything okay? I hadn't really talked to her, since before the party. She'd left voicemails asking about Sarah, about when they were going to see us next, about whether we needed anything. Mom, Sarah and I broke. The silence on the other end of the line felt infinite. Oh, sweetheart, when? 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Michael, why didn't tell me? Because admitting it out loud made it real. Because explaining what happened meant admitting how blind I'd been. Because I couldn't stand the thought of my mother knowing that her son had been made a fool of in front of everyone he cared about. I didn't know how. Come home, she said immediately. Pack a bag and come home tonight. Mom, I can't. I have a lease, I have interviews lined. The interviews can wait. Need to be around people who love. I looked around the apartment Sarah and I had shared. Her coffee mug was still in the sink from the morning she'd left. Her shampoo was still in the shower because she'd only packed the essentials. The cake box was still in the trash, too big to fit properly, the lid sticking like a monument to my stupidity. The AD lent me, I said. For the cake. I can pay back now. Michael David, don't dare. But the money was spent on love. Love for her. That's never, even when it's not returned the way we hope. I started crying then, sitting on the couch where Sarah used to curl next to me to watch movies, holding the phone with both hands like it was an anchor. I feel so, Mom. Or not, honey, there's a difference. Everyone knew. Everyone at the party knew she was seeing someone else, and they just watched me walk in with that cake like some kind of pathetic. Stop. Stop right there. We're not pathetic. We're loving. Saw girlfriend's birthday coming and moved heaven and earth to make it special. That's who are, Michael. Don't let her choices change how see. But it was too late for that. Every time I closed my eyes I saw that moment in the doorway. The weight of the cake in my arms, Marcus's hand on Sarah's back, the room full of people who'd known I was walking into a trap. I'd replayed it 1,000 times, looking for the moment when I could have handled it differently. Could have walked in with more dignity. Could have set the cake down and congratulated them both and left like it didn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered that I'd trusted her. It mattered that I'd believed we were building something together. It mattered that I'd borrowed money I couldn't afford to repay just to see her smile. And now I had to figure out how to live in a world where that trust, that belief, that sacrifice meant nothing. The check from Sarah stayed on my kitchen counter for a week before I finally cashed it, not because I forgave her, but because I needed the money to pay my rent. Even my love had a price, apparently. 6 months after the worst night of I'm writing this from a studio apartment that costs twice what I can afford, in a part of town where nobody knows my story. I moved here because running into people from that night was me slowly. Every trip to the grocery store was a minefield. Every familiar face at the gas station was a reminder of the man who'd borrowed money for a birthday cake while his girlfriend planned her exit strategy. Jake found my new address somehow. Showed last week with takeout and that same concerned look everyone's been wearing around me since the party. Look like man. I probably did. I'd been working construction again finally, but the job was an hour away and the pay was garbage. I was basically living on instant noodles and regret. Thanks, really boosting my confidence here. He set the food on my kitchen counter, which was also my dining table, which was also my desk. Studio living at its finest. When's the last time talked to anyone? Actually talked. I'm talking to right now, I mean besides work. When's the last time went out, dated someone? Did anything besides work and hide in this place? I didn't answer because we both knew. The last time I'd tried to date was 3 months ago. A coworker had set me with her sister. Nice girl, kindergarten teacher, the kind of person who probably helped old ladies cross the street. We went for coffee. She asked about my last relationship. I told her the truth. About Sarah, about Marcus, about the cake. About how I'd been so focused on grand gestures that I'd missed the fact that my girlfriend was already gone. She listened politely, made sympathetic noises in all the right places, then excused herself to the bathroom and never came back. I sat in that coffee shop for 45 minutes before the barista finally asked if I needed anything else. The pity in her eyes told me she'd watched the whole thing play out. That was my last first date. Mike, can't keep doing this too. Jake was using his serious voice, the one he'd used when his dad was dying and when his wife had their miscarriage. The voice reserved for real problems. Doing what? Punishing for trusting someone loved. But that's where Jake had it wrong. I wasn't punishing for trusting Sarah. I was punishing for being so completely, catastrophically wrong about everything. About Sarah. About Marcus. About... The worst part wasn't even the cheating. Cheating happens. People fall out of love, fall into love with someone else, make terrible choices that everyone involved. The worst part was how thoroughly I'd misread my own. I'd thought Sarah and I were solid. I'd thought the rough patch from my unemployment was something we'd work through together. I'd thought her late nights and new clothes and secret phone calls were just getting complicated. I'd thought I knew her. But the woman who'd let me borrow money from Mrs. Chen while planning a party with another man. The woman who'd watch me practice what I'd say when I surprised her. The woman who'd known I was going to walk into that room with a cake and let it happen anyway. I'd never met that woman before that night. And if I was that wrong about someone I'd lived with for a year, someone I'd planned to marry, someone I'd thought I understood completely, then what else was I wrong about? Jake was still talking, something about moving forward and not letting one person define my future, but I wasn't really listening. I was thinking about Mrs. Chen. I'd seen her last week at the laundromat. She'd spotted me across the room and waved, then made her way over with that same sweet smile. Michael, how's that beautiful girlfriend of yours? 6 months and no one had told her. Why would they? She was just the old lady from 2B who'd contributed grocery money to a stranger's love story. Woo broke Mrs. Chen. Her face felt like I just told her someone died. Oh dear, what happened? I looked at this woman who'd believed in young love enough to sacrifice her own comfort, and I couldn't tell her the truth, couldn't explain that her grocery money had funded my public humiliation. We just grew apart. She patted my arm with those arthritic fingers. These things happen, dear. I'll find someone else. A good boy like me. If only she knew. If only she knew that the good boy she'd helped had been so desperate to prove his love that he'd ignored every sign that it wasn't wanted anymore. If only she knew that her 40s had bought me the most expensive lesson of my that being good, being loving, being willing to sacrifice for someone else means absolutely nothing, if sacrificing for someone who's already gone. Jake left that night promising to check on me again soon. I away the takeout he'd brought without eating it. I'd lost my appetite somewhere around the time I realized that everyone in my was treating me like a charity case. The broken man who'd loved too much and paid too high a price. But they had it backwards. I hadn't loved too much. I'd loved too blindly. I'd loved the version of Sarah that existed in my head instead of the woman who was actually living in my apartment, sleeping in my bed, planning her escape route while I planned her birthday party. That's the thing they don't tell about betrayal. It's not just that someone trusted broke that trust, it's that realize never really knew them at all. Every memory becomes suspect. Every sweet moment gets re-examined for signs missed. Did she mean it when she said she loved me? Or was she already thinking about him? Was she laughing at my jokes or at me? When she me goodbye in the mornings, was she counting down the days until she wouldn't have to anymore? I started seeing a therapist 2 months ago. Court ordered actually, after I got into a with some guy at a bar who made a joke about surprise parties. Anger management they called it. Dr. Martinez has kind eyes and a patient voice and a way of asking questions that makes realize how messed thinking has become. What would say to a friend who was going through what went through? I'd tell them it wasn't their fault. But don't believe that about Pan. Because I should have known. The signs were all there. I chose not to see them. Why do you think made that choice? That's the question I've been avoiding for 6 months. The one that keeps me at night, that makes me check my phone for messages from people who've stopped calling. That makes me see betrayal in every interaction with every person I meet. I chose not to see the signs because seeing them would have meant acknowledging that the I'd built, the future I'd planned, the woman I'd fallen in love with were all illusions. It would have meant starting over. Admitting failure. Facing the possibility that I wasn't enough, that I'd never been enough, that all my grand gestures and borrowed money, and desperate attempts to be the boyfriend she deserved had been pathetic from the beginning. So I'd ignored the late nights and the secret texts, and the way she'd started looking at me like I was a problem to be solved instead of a man to be loved. I'd focused on birthday cakes instead of birthday conversations. I'd planned surprises instead of having difficult discussions. I'd borrowed money from everyone I knew instead of asking the woman I loved if she still wanted to be loved by me. And when reality finally cornered me in that doorway, holding a cake that nobody wanted, surrounded by people who'd known the truth for months, I realized that I hadn't been fighting for Sarah at all. I'd been fighting against the truth. The therapist says I'm making progress. Says I'm starting to understand the difference between love and desperation, between generosity and manipulation, between making grand gestures and making real connections. She's probably right, but understanding doesn't fix anything. Understanding doesn't give me back the 30-20 I spent on a cake that sat in my kitchen until it molded. Understanding doesn't repair the relationships with the people who watched me and didn't know how to help. Understanding doesn't change the fact that somewhere in this city, Sarah and Marcus are probably planning their own future, their own parties, their own special moments that don't involve desperate men borrowing money they can't afford to repay. I drove past their apartment building last month. Didn't stop, didn't get out, Just drove past like some kind of checking on his own replacement. They have a balcony now, second floor facing the street. I could see plants out there, the kind Sarah always said she wanted but never had space for in our place. A small table with 2 chairs. Wind chimes that probably sound beautiful when the breeze hits them just right. They built the I'd thought we were building. I'd bought a cake to celebrate. I'm writing this because I need someone to understand what really happened that night. Not the version where I was the victim of a heartless woman and her selfish lover. Not the version where I was a saint who got betrayed by someone who didn't deserve him. The real version, heard, the version where a man who'd stopped paying attention to the woman he loved decided to buy his way back into her heart, instead of asking why he'd lost it in the first place. The version where that same man borrowed money from people who could barely afford it to fund a gesture that was more about his own ego than her happiness. The version where everyone at that party knew more about his relationship than he did. I was the fool in the doorway with the cake, but I'd been a fool long before that night. The cake was just when everyone else finally got to see it.